I think you'll get an amazing glimpse into a world that is long gone and a city that was lost from human memory for 2,000 years, a time capsule of the disaster that occurred then. And you'll get a first-hand, front-row seat to probably the greatest disaster of the ancient world.
This small, I mean, in today's terms, small city had to deal with essentially 3 disasters, a tsunami, an earthquake, and a volcanic eruption in the space of 12 hours. It's inconceivable, really.
It's one of those events that has kind of been lost in myth and history a bit, and we can go on kind of historians at the time, like Pliny or so on, about what happened, and we've made it into an entertaining watch.
So Pompeii was an important city. It was one of the most important cities in probably the second most important region in the entire Mediterranean. So it held an important place in all of the erupted cities. Pompeii is such a phenomenon today because of the immediacy of the place, both as a city during its life. It is a community, and we have all sorts of kind of connections to how that must have been. So we can walk through the city of Pompeii and walk through the streets and look into the houses and look into the shops. And so there's a level of familiarity that is attached to it. Yet at the same time, there's this extraordinary event where the city was completely obliterated. And I think we have a kind of a morbid fascination in these kinds of cataclysmic natural disasters.
Well, the interesting thing about Pompeii is that, you know, so much of it exists kind of captured in time. So much of it was buried and preserved in Pompeii that you know exactly how people dressed. It's not a matter of conjecture. We know for certain, you know, what people wore, what they look like. So that's one of the fun things about this movie is kind of the historical accuracy that we've been able to bring to the film.
Settle, very quiet, please.
Unfortunately, we've seen in the last decade, Mother Nature can be unrelenting and hard and fast, and I think Pompeii is the extreme of that. And I think it holds a great interest for us for those reasons.
People were flash-fried by the pyroclastic surge, just frozen in a moment of death. People, animals, and then that was lost for almost 2,000 years and then rediscovered in this perfectly preserved form. So it really is an opportunity to kind of glimpse an ancient civilization in a way that you just can't anywhere else.
The images of the people that died in Pompeii with their children and in their loved ones' arms, and how could anything be more dramatic?
You'll see gladiatorial combat. You'll see combat in Britannia. You'll see big emotion, big love story.
It's about freedom for Atticus. I mean, that's the one string that he's holding on to. He is the champion gladiator. He's killed more gladiators than you can imagine. They're like me.
This is very much a passion project for me. It's a labor of love. It's thrilling to be here shooting it.
Him just as a person just has like the loveliest energy. Like he's so easy to talk to, which is really important for a director. I think, you know, he's really friendly, and it's very nice to work with someone who seems so genuinely excited about everything that you're doing, you know? I mean, he's just he's so bouncy every day, and he's so into this film, which is really, you know, that energy is kind of contagious, and it makes you excited about it.
Pompeii was his idea. He's always been fascinated by it, but he has also an innate understanding of what the audiences are going to respond to. Hence, it is not a documentary. So you're going to have something that is grounded, but something that is exciting, exhilarating, also very emotional, and I think very believable.
You know, he knows exactly what he wants, but he's not obsessive, and, you know, he's open to collaboration.
Mark?
When I got the script through the door and it was Pompeii, I thought that should have been made into a film by now, and it hasn't, obviously. So that was the first thing that drew me to it.
We were inspired to cast Kit Harington as Milo in Pompeii because we saw him in Game of Thrones, in which I think he embodied both romantic qualities and the physical qualities of a warrior. And because there is a love story, we wanted him to be somebody who could show emotion and be engaging and believable on that level. But he's also a gladiator, so he has to have physical prowess.
I think the thing that sprung out of the page about Milo to me and why I responded to him is there was kind of one word that went with him for me, and it was vengeance. It was utter rage that went with this young man, taking vengeance on as many people as you can until you're gone, and then that way you might find some sort of freedom. And I love that about him. I kind of always respond to very inwardly turmoil people, and he's a twisted individual. And then of course you have Cassia, who comes in the movie, who changes him somewhat.
Paul has given me every opportunity to be as sadistic as possible in this movie. He is quite jolly about it, quite loves it. I remember one time we were doing a scene with Kit Harington and I were shooting, and Paul said, how do you feel when he starts talking to you? And I said, well, quite honestly, I just feel like I want to punch him right in his face. I just want to punch his face in. Paul said, great, let's do that. That sounds fantastic. Let's punch his face.
Stop! I've always wanted to do a film like this, but there's never been a great female role. So the fact that she's quite tough and clever is really cool, I think.
And the truth is, it's a really beautiful love story, and in the most classical sense.
What's wrong?
If they catch you up here with me,
I'll tell them it was my choice.
It's been a lot of fun. I mean, it's such a wonderful crew and I get to do such cool things.
No, I'm really jealous that all the boys get to do the kind of fighting and stuff. Like, I've done an action film before, and I loved it so much. I loved the stunt training, and I'm really... Every time I see them sort of practicing their sword work and everything, I get a little pang of jealousy because I love doing that kind of thing.
Give me the benefit of your wisdom. Do you enjoy the sport?
Men killing each other for our amusement is not a sport.
We're in the Imperial box, and this is a point where I am trying to explain to young Cassia, played by Emily, that whether she likes it or not, she's going to become my wife, and the person that she is actually falling in love with is in the arena about to die, because I have set that up.
Atticus has one more kill before he's a free man, and so that's what he's been living for. He's been literally fighting for his life. And there's a great scene in the movie. He says, so who is the poor so-and-so who has to die for my freedom? And who is it? None other than Kit Harington.
Who's the poor bastard who has to die for my freedom?
Which is funny because we share a room. And so we have to sleep together in the same room, and then we have to go out and kill each other.
When you die, the blow will come from the front. I promise it will be tomorrow.
Adewole's a big guy. Like, he carries a lot of power in what he does, in how he acts, and in how he fights. And that's exactly who his character is supposed to be. Adewole just brings a real gravitas to that role. And he's great to work with. Again, he's very easy to work with and very giving in scenes.
It's kind of because on the last take, because obviously you're in the middle of a fight, you're kind of like a little winded.
Yeah.
But this time, because you're fresh, it's like when you turn, you're going to have this guy and then go into the lead.
We both got injured at times. We both hurt ourselves. It was exhausting. It was in the baking heat, and it was very tiring. But tribute to that man and of how, and both of us, but how we both plodded through, and we felt like we really achieved something after that day.
The happy couple. Cut! Lovely.
It's never the role first, it's always the film. What I think Paul has done that's so interesting is he's built sets that are really extraordinary, and the green screen seems to be a step behind those. He will have the ability to create this unbelievable world and a way for us to have a look into the historic Pompeii before this terrible tragedy that I don't think we have seen before.
I cast Kiefer Sutherland as Corvus because I wanted to take a character who the audience are more familiar with playing a hero, Jack Bauer in 24, and flip it to be this really delicious villain.
Good. Have the pledges drawn up. You will have my mark on them tomorrow, after your games. I do believe a drink is in order.
Of course. Shall we join our guest?
Perhaps your daughter can bring it.
My daughter?
You put on the wardrobe, and all of a sudden you start to feel that you are a part of that time. You take a look at the sets, and all of a sudden you feel you're in that time. Those take layers off of what we would have to do kind of with our own imaginations. It's creating an environment that starts to feel very real, which allows all of the actors the opportunity to kind of really focus on their performances to try and make those real. Most of the fighting within the context of a film is a dance, and so it's learning the choreography, finding ways that somehow might be physically easier for you to accomplish a specific move, so you work with the other actor that you're doing that sequence with. You work with the stunt coordinators with that as well. But really, I always have likened it to kind of learning a dance.
Pompeii has been described as like the Vegas of the Roman Empire. A lot of entertainment there. Bustling seaport, wealthy Romans had their holiday villas in the surrounding environment, a lot of holiday activity. The arena was very, very popular, a hive of very colorful activity.
An area that was brimming with more kinds of entertainment complexes and leisure facilities than anywhere else in the Roman world.
The interesting thing about the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in Pompeii in 79 AD is it took place over the festival of Vulcanalia. Vulcan being a Roman god, Vulcanalia was a time of tremendous festivity, wine drinking, food eating, general debauchery in praise of this god. It really was a big tragedy for the Roman Empire. And of course, they didn't really understand why it had happened. They literally thought the gods were angry.
He's a businessman, and he's a deal maker, and he's a hustler, and he's just trying to, if he can, push it over the line and get that deal done, and then everything will be okay, And in that sense, he's, he's like any businessman. He keeps seeing the big one,
So everything you're seeing here is based on real Pompeii. So every painting on the wall, every fresco on the wall, every design in the tile work on the floor is based on reality.
Well, it's devastation first.
The greatest challenge during this film has been the physicality of it. There's so much fighting, there's so many action scenes. If I'm not horse riding one day, I'm fighting someone twice my size the next day. Rolling around in sand with bits of glass in it sometimes, I've got cuts and bruises everywhere, and I've never done anything quite as physical as this. But I love that challenge, and so that's the greatest challenge, but it's also the thing I enjoy most about this.
I felt it was very important to have live things in the shot. I think it's one of the things that sells the set as real. If you have live animals, if you have real horses, if the horses are kind of, there's real horse shit on the street, there's hay on the street. I mean, this, you can see it now, obviously, but if you could smell it, it smells authentic. You know, it feels authentic. There's authentic dirt everywhere. There's animals. There's food everywhere. You know, this really is what a Pompeian street would have been like. And of course, we know that because Pompeii is one of the few archaeological sites where things were perfectly preserved. Because it was buried in ash, it was kind of locked in time. And it's one of the few sites where historians could see exactly what life was like up until the moment when people died, because they died so fast that they were like frozen in time.
I mean, I hope that they love the love story. I know that, I think the thing that will draw people in is the action and it being in 3D and it's kind of, you know, explosions and all that kind of fun stuff that everyone loves to see. But I hope that, you know, I hope that people are into the romance. I've never done a romantic lead before. I've never done this. I've never sort of been a part of this kind of relationship in a film.
We're making a movie, it feels like set at the end of the world, because that's what it was like for the people in Pompeii.
Unless you have some reality in every single scene, you won't sell the reality of the film. You can't rely 100% on CG. The more you can shoot in camera, the better your CG will be, because the audience will believe it a bit more. And we've tried to be as photoreal as possible. The style of this film is very realistic. Paul felt, and I completely agree with him, that first of all, this is based on a real event. It's not science fiction, it's not a comic book novel or comic book graphic novel. This really happened. Second of all, if people are to really care about what happened, they have to believe it's real. So no gimmicks, no camera work that is so fancy it takes you out of the film. So everything is, we hope, grounded.
We do concept illustrations to help show the director and actors and just people in general, the crew, about what we're hoping to achieve. There's a few, we didn't do tons on this movie. There's a few here. We started sort of chronologically. We were inside the Celtic hut where our young Milo wakes up and his village is burnt. Then sort of later on, this next one here, this is the first opening shot of us arriving at Pompeii. There's the street of tombs here where our carriage arrives, and then they go in through the gates, all done in CGI, of course. And then there's Pompeii in the background. This is the garden courtyard. And because, you know, we have limited stage space and we have the whole build of this movie is pretty much all the movies are built in the studio. We had to readapt and change a lot of things. Paul likes shooting he likes symmetry, and the classical architecture of this period obviously is very symmetrical, so it was very useful that way for him. And he likes the stylized look of things, but he also, this time we were really trying to make it much more gritty and real.
After we got you know, into X amount of weeks of the research and really were absolutely embedded in what Pompeii and Italy and Rome and all of that era would have been like, then there was, you know, really great discussions about what the flavor of this would be, what the color palettes would be, how we would differentiate between our wealthy and our poor, our slaves and our Romans, the differentiation we would incorporate into the two eras that we cover. For the whole picture, we've probably are responsible for in the 2,000 or 3,000 costumes, full complete costumes.
To make soft weapons, we make real weapons. So what we would do to make a real weapon would be to find something and copy it or modify it, make it out of aluminum and rubber for fighting, and then we would take that and copy that again into rubber, make a mold of it, and pour it up in a hard plastic. That way, plastic and plastic together aren't going to hurt anything.
There's never a moment where you don't see some smoke wafting through or some dust wafting through, flames in the background, things moving, just generally lots of stuff going on. There's acting going on, but always behind them, there's lots going on, and that's 90% of what we did through this whole movie is just keeping things rolling.
When we first started this, the first challenge that we had with Paul was to, and one of the very first questions that he asked was, how are we going to do this? How are we going to create 79 AD And we knew right from the top that we had to go to Pompeii and do our research and really start with the basics, learn the geography of Pompeii. And we did go before production started, and we actually shot about 35,000 high-resolution photographs in the site. We scanned the site with LiDAR technology, and we started building the virtual version of Pompeii 4 months before principal photography started. We storyboarded the sequence, we prevised the sequence, and we had an entire shooting plan before we went to camera with it. We prepped and prepped and prepped. A typical composite on this movie, and also because it's stereo, 3D stereo, will probably have 100 to 150 different rendered elements.
Well, right now we have 5 3D rigs working on 3 separate units. We have two rigs on the main unit, and that, each 3D rig is 2 cameras, really. So we've got 10 cameras working right now, and 5 full sets of lenses. Full sets of lenses, and anyway, a lot of gear.
The eruption of Mount Vesuvius was one of the most explosive volcanic eruptions that we know from history. But I think most importantly, it was a completely unimagined type of natural disaster, one that the Pompeians could never have even known of, never have even imagined. And I think that's what really captivates me in thinking about what kind of event was this.
We've tried to keep everything as realistic as possible, so we've limited the CG whenever we can. Obviously, for large volcanic explosions, you need computer-generated imagery. But for here, where it's a really intense fight scene between our 2 leads, we've kept everything as real as possible. So it makes the working conditions very, very hard for the actors. They have to really exert themselves. But they're sucking up a lot of ash and smoke and dust, so it's very tough work for them.
We've pretty much covered every element there is in this movie. I've had ash, mud, rain, severe wind, lightning storms. Everything they've thrown at me. Nothing beats the ash. The ash is the worst. That is basically house insulation. And it's, at the end of the day, I won't go into graphic detail, but you blow your nose and it's just black. Everything's black. So it's pretty brutal. The ash, I'm glad we're out of the ash. That was the worst thing.
There was a volcanic eruption in the Bay of Naples. After the volcanic eruption, there was essentially hail, pumice stone, then ash. Then there was a period of calm. And then there was the most devastating component, the pyroclastic flow, traveling incredibly fast that incinerated everything. The nearest to that probably is a nuclear blast.
Visually, I think it's going to just be stunning. I think it's going to be a really impressive and big movie.
There's one word that really sums it up, is iconic. Now, obviously, another word is epic.
Whatever is happening here, find freedom, my friend. We have to get to the harbor.
We will go together.
I think you'll get an amazing glimpse into a world that is long gone and a city that was lost from human memory for 2,000 years.